She looked me dead in the eye and said I wasn't welcome for Christmas. In the house I helped them buy, so I smiled. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I just nodded, closed my coat, and walked into the cold. 3 days later, while they were still sipping wine and posing by the tree, their mortgage payments stopped. Just like that. Frozen. Like the snow still clinging to their front step. They didn't know the money came from me. They never even asked. But they were about to learn what silence really sounds like. Before I tell you everything, I just want to say thank you for being here. I don't take it lightly, not anymore. If you're listening right now, if you're taking a moment out of your day to sit with my truth, I want you to know. It matters. You matter. Tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Are you sitting on your porch with a cup of tea, like I used to? Or maybe you're lying in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why the people you loved the most turned cold the fastest. Have you ever been pushed aside by the very people you raised, fed, or sheltered? Have you ever been told through words or silence that you no longer fit in the life you helped build? Because if you have, you're not alone. I've learned something over the years. Betrayal doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it shows up in the smallest moments, a missed call, an unspoken invite, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. So go ahead and drop your story in the comments. Or, if it's too heavy for the world to see, send it to the email below. This space is for you too, for those of us who gave everything and learned the power of taking it back. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Margaret, I'm 67 years old, widowed. I spent most of my life in a quiet town just outside Nashville. Nothing fancy, just honest work, a lot of prayer, and learning to live with less so my son could have more. I raised my only boy Daniel on my own after his father passed. He was just 7 when cancer took the love of my life, and from that day forward, it was just me and him against the world. I cleaned houses, took night shifts at the grocery store, even stitched hems for neighbors just to keep the lights on. Daniel was always a sweet boy. He didn't complain about secondhand shoes or peanut butter sandwiches 5 days a week. He saw how hard I worked, and he always said the same thing when he hugged me at night. One day, I'm gonna take care of you, Mom. And I believed him. He grew into a good man. Kind, respectful. He got a scholarship, went to school, and landed a steady job in finance. I was proud of him. More proud than words could ever explain. He met a young woman named Melissa. Smart, educated, beautiful, in that polished way that made you feel like your hands were always too dry and your shoes not quite clean enough. She was polite at first. Always smiled, always thanked me for dinner. But there was a chill underneath it. You know the kind, where someone compliments your cooking while barely touching the plate. I could feel it. She didn't hate me. She just wanted Daniel's new life, without the part that reminded him where he came from. When they got married, I wanted to bless them with something big, something lasting. Daniel never asked, but I knew they were struggling to afford a home. So I dipped into the inheritance his father left me. Money I had never touched, not even when times were hard. I called the bank, set it all up, paid the down payment, and arranged for quiet monthly help from my trust. It was their house? Yes, but I made sure they'd never drown in bills. Not on my watch. And I never told them. I didn't want the credit, I just wanted to know they were okay. But somewhere along the way, okay turned into entitled. Appreciation turned into assumption. And that house, the one I helped them build, stopped feeling like home to me. My voice may be quiet now, but don't mistake it. I didn't give them a house, I gave them a beginning, and they turned it into a stage to shut me out. But I didn't see it all at once. No, these things don't come with warning signs. They creep in slow, like cold air under a closed door. The shift began around Christmas last year. Now, let me tell you something about Christmas in our family. It used to be sacred. Even when we had nothing, I made sure the house smelled like cinnamon, like warmth. I'd bake from scratch, string up lights from the dollar store, play that same scratched-up Nat King Cole CD over and over. When Daniel was little, we'd make paper snowflakes and hang them from the ceiling. Even as he got older and life got busy, he never missed a Christmas at Mama's house. And after he married Melissa, I passed the torch, started going to their home. I brought the ham, the gifts for the grandbabies, even that old angel topper from our first tree. Every year, I'd show up in my red cardigan with homemade pie, and Daniel would greet me with a smile. I'd sit beside the little ones while they unwrapped toys, and Melissa would sip her wine on the couch like she was just barely tolerating the chaos. Still, we were together, and that meant something. But last year, something felt different. December rolled in cold, the stores were lit up, the neighborhood trees were shining, but my phone stayed silent. No "what time are you coming over?" No group message with cookie baking plans, just nothing. I waited. December 20th, nothing. December 22nd, still nothing. So I called. Daniel answered, but his voice was off. Distant, like he was rushing through the conversation. He said they were still figuring out plans, that Melissa's side of the family might be doing something early, that they'd let me know. Let me know? That wasn't how we did things. I was the one who brought Christmas. I was Christmas in that family. On December 23rd, I got the text, not even from Daniel. From Melissa. She said, "Hey, just wanted to let you know we're doing a small thing this year. Just immediate family." Just immediate family. Those 3 words hit harder than any slap could have. I read them once. Then again. Then slowly, I said it out loud to myself. Just immediate family. I stood in my kitchen, staring at that message. The pie crust I'd started was still sitting on the counter. My apron was still dusted with flour. The gifts I'd wrapped for the kids were in a bag by the door. That's when it hit me. I wasn't part of their immediate family anymore. I wasn't the grandmother who made things magical. I wasn't the mother who kept them afloat. I was just extra. A formality. Someone they tolerated out of tradition. Until they didn't have to. And they'd finally decided they didn't have to. I tried to tell myself it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe they'd changed their minds. Maybe there was still time. So on Christmas Eve, I bundled up and took a walk. I wasn't trying to show up uninvited. I've never believed in forcing myself where I'm not wanted. I just needed air. Needed to move. Needed to see something that made sense. Their house was only 5 blocks away. I'd walked that path hundreds of times. Birthday dinners, surprise visits, babysitting calls. I knew the cracks in the sidewalk, the overgrown bush by the Johnson's yard, the mailbox that always leaned just a little to the left. But that night, nothing felt familiar. As I came around the corner, I saw their house glowing like a postcard. Lights wrapped around every window. The wreath I bought them from that little craft fair 2 years ago was hanging proud on the front door. And through the front windows, clear as day, I saw people inside. Not just Daniel and Melissa, no, there were guests. Laughter, wine glasses in hand, holiday music playing. The smell of something rich and buttery drifted through the air. A full Christmas gathering. The kind I used to host before they had a dining room big enough to replace me. And there I stood, on the sidewalk, in the cold, watching a celebration I wasn't even considered for. That's when Mrs. Dunlap, their neighbor across the street, came outside to take her trash to the curb. She saw me, nodded kindly, then said, almost casually, "Big party over there tonight." Melissa said they were keeping it small this year, said your presence makes things a little tense. She wasn't being cruel, she was just repeating what she'd heard, but it felt like someone poured ice water straight down my spine. Tense. Too judgmental. Not part of the new family culture. I walked away before she could say more. I didn't trust my mouth to stay shut, or my eyes to stay dry. They threw a Christmas party. In the house I helped them buy, ate at the table I chipped in for, used the silver I helped polish, laughed under lights I helped hang, and I wasn't even worth a phone call. They said I didn't belong. Not in their holiday. Not in their home, not in their picture-perfect life. But what they didn't realize is, you don't get to rewrite your roots just because the leaves changed. They called me judgmental, I call it memory, and I was remembering everything, but I didn't call them. I didn't knock on the door, I didn't text back. Because I've learned something over the years, the loudest power is the one that says nothing. I walked back home slowly that night. The air was crisp, sharp enough to bite. The lights on my street weren't as bright. No music, no guests. Just me. And silence. I stepped inside and poured myself a small cup of cocoa. Sat in the chair by the window, the one facing the tiny tree I decorated by myself that year. No ornaments from the grandkids. No hand-drawn cards, just a simple angel at the top and white lights blinking soft, like a heartbeat trying to hold on. I stared at that tree for a long time. And in that quiet moment, I had a choice. I could cry. Or I could remember that silence has teeth. I set my cup down, stood up slow, my knees are what they used to be, and walked to the little filing cabinet I keep in the back room. Second drawer. The one with all the old documents no one thinks I'm sharp enough to manage anymore, but I remember where every paper lives. I opened the manila envelope marked Daniel plus Melissa, mortgage setup. Pulled out the trust agreement, the property tax receipts, the transfer approvals from my account, the account numbers, payment schedules, all of it. Neatly organized, quiet power in black ink. They thought that house was theirs. They didn't know I'd been the one quietly making the mortgage payments from a protected trust. One Daniel didn't even realize was still active. I'd set it up years ago. Out of love. Out of fear that the world would chew them up if I didn't soften the edges. But now it was time to let them walk without the cushion. I picked up the phone, pressed the number I had saved under Bank Mortgage Services. A young woman answered, polite, cheerful, probably someone else's daughter. I gave her the account number, verified my identity. Then I said it, calm, like I was reading off a grocery list. Yes, I'd like to pause all further automatic mortgage transfers tied to account 2742, effective immediately. No temporary hold, indefinite, thank you. She asked me if I needed a reason for the record. I just said, no reason at all, just time for things to stand on their own. And that was it. Click. I went back to my chair, picked up my cocoa. It had gone cold, but somehow it still tasted like peace. The cocoa had gone cold, but somehow it still tasted like peace. As I sat there in that quiet room, the past came back to me, piece by piece, like a quilt I'd stitched over the years and forgotten in the attic. I remembered every step that led me to this moment, every choice I made out of love, every detail they never knew, because I never asked them to know. See, when Daniel and Melissa got married, they were struggling. Melissa had just finished her degree. Daniel's job was stable, but not enough to carry a home and start a family the way they wanted. I remember the day he called me, his voice heavy with pride and hesitation. He said, "We're thinking of putting in an offer, but it's a stretch." I told him not to worry, that his father had left something behind, and that it was time it served its purpose. What I didn't tell him was that I was also adding my own savings. My stitching money, my night shift grocery pay, the money I scraped together for emergencies that never came until now. The house was purchased in their name. I insisted on that. I didn't want to own it. I just wanted to see my son stand tall in front of his own front door. But behind the curtain, I made sure they wouldn't fall. I opened a living trust account, tied to my name, quietly linked to the mortgage. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but every month that payment went through on time. Never missed. I didn't want them to know, because I wanted them to feel capable, strong. I didn't want Melissa to resent me. I didn't want Daniel to feel like a boy under his mother's wing. So I kept it to myself. Year after year, I watched them live their life, build their kitchen, renovate the nursery, host parties. I never said a word. Never once reminded them that the ground beneath their feet was being watered by the woman they were now trying to erase. But Christmas changed something in me, not because they forgot me, no. It was how easily they forgot me, how effortless it was to draw a line and place me on the other side. That's when I realized, if I wasn't family enough to sit at their table, I wasn't foundation enough to hold up their roof. So I redirected the funds, not to punish, not to hurt, to clarify. I took the next auto transfer and rerouted it to my emergency savings account. The account where I used to save for Daniel's birthday presents when he was 5. The same one I used to fund my bus rides to work. That money had never belonged to them. It had simply been borrowed by love, and love had finally come to collect. And love had finally come to collect. I spent New Year's Eve the way I always do, alone but not lonely. I made myself a small dinner. Black-eyed peas, a little cornbread, and just enough sparkling cider to feel like celebration. The TV was on low, counting down the hours, and in that soft flicker of light, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. No expectations, no cold smiles, no being made to feel like a burden. Just me in my home with my memories and my strength. But by January 2nd, peace had company. The phone rang just before noon. I saw Daniel's name flash across the screen. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. His voice was tight, breathless, already spiraling. "Mom," he said, "did you touch the mortgage? No hello? No how are you?" Just straight to the thing that finally made me real to him again. I didn't say anything at first. I let him sit in the silence he'd left me in over Christmas. Then I spoke, soft, measured. "I thought you said I was an immediate family." A beat of silence. The kind of silence where the truth starts to sting. I could hear him inhale like he was about to explain it all away. Maybe say it was a mistake, a miscommunication, blame Melissa, blame holiday stress. But I didn't give him the chance. I assumed that meant I shouldn't interfere with your finances either. His voice dropped. "Mom, we got a notice from the bank. It says the mortgage is in default. We're behind. How is that even possible?" I took another sip of tea. I kept my voice steady. No anger, no tears. "Well," I said, "I imagine that's what happens when the invisible money stops showing up. It's hard to track something when you never knew it was there." He went quiet again. You could almost hear his thoughts catching up to the years. The dinners, the renovations, the sense of ease they'd lived with, not knowing it had been bought with quiet sacrifice. Why wouldn't you tell me?" he asked, but his voice was smaller now. Not demanding, just confused. I answered plainly. "Because I wanted you to feel proud. Independent. I wanted Melissa to feel like she built something real with you. I didn't want to be the string attached to your success. But pride without gratitude is just noise. And I got tired of the noise." He tried again. "Mom, we can fix this. Maybe you can." I stopped him gently. "I didn't call the bank to destroy you, Daniel. I called them to remind myself that I still had power, that I wasn't just the woman who dropped off pies and was left off the guest list. I was the one who held the bricks you two built your house with." He was quiet. I could feel the weight land. I ended the call the same way I ended the year. Calm, unshaken. "Take care of your family," I said. "It's time you figured out how to stand on your own." And I hung up. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting on their approval. I didn't feel like someone hoping to be remembered. I felt like a woman who had finally and fully remembered herself. But over on their side of town, the panic was just beginning. I don't know what was said between Daniel and Melissa after our call. I don't know if there were raised voices or stone-cold silence. But I do know what happened next. They went to see a lawyer. They needed answers. Fast. The foreclosure notice wasn't a warning, it was a reality check. It said, in black and white, what they had ignored for years, that someone else had been holding the rope, and that rope had slipped from their fingers. Now here's what they found out. And mind you, this is the part they never bothered to understand when everything was comfortable. Yes, the deed was in their names. That was my gift to them. But the mortgage? The payments? The foundation? That was all me. The trust I had set up all those years ago was a quiet behind-the-scenes agreement. My name wasn't on the house, no, but my money was in every beam, every brick, every payment. The trust was legally bound to the loan account, and when I stopped the automatic transfers, the payment stopped cold. The lawyer, a young man, probably the same age Daniel was when I first set up the trust, told them exactly what they didn't want to hear. Mrs. Sarah's trust account was funding this mortgage. It doesn't matter that her name isn't on the title. The financial responsibility was hers by setup, and yours by default. Now that she's withdrawn, the full liability shifts to the named homeowners. That's you. I can only imagine Melissa's face in that moment. Maybe confused, maybe stunned, maybe angry. But what she felt didn't matter as much as what she had to face. The house wasn't theirs the way they thought it was. It was borrowed comfort, borrowed security, borrowed peace. And I had called it back, every quiet cent of it. They decorated that house for Instagram. But they forgot the real foundation was off camera. It wasn't the backsplash in the kitchen, or the brand new chandelier above the dining table. It was me. The woman in the background. The one with flour on her apron and receipts in her filing drawer. And I had just reminded them what happens when you build a home on love. And then treat that love like it doesn't belong in the photo. They forgot the real foundation was off camera. And when people lose the thing they took for granted, they don't apologize first. They come in swinging. It was January 4th. I had just finished folding laundry and was setting the kettle on when I heard the knock. Not a gentle one. A sharp, hard knock like someone wasn't asking to be let in. They were demanding it. I opened the door and there she was, Melissa. Hair pulled back too tight, jaw clenched, coat half-zipped like she had rushed over in fury. Not panic, fury. She didn't even wait for an invitation. She stepped right in, like it was her name on my lease, and pointed a finger like I was the child in this conversation. "You're ruining our lives," she snapped. I didn't flinch. She looked around the living room like it was beneath her. Like my doilies and family photos were props in a play she didn't audition for. "You're punishing us because we didn't invite you for Christmas?" Her voice was loud, brittle, sharp at the edges. I didn't rise to meet her volume. I never do. Instead, I sat back in my chair, the same one I rocked Daniel in when he had croup at 2 years old, and I folded my hands in my lap. Then I said, with the kind of stillness that makes people nervous, "No, dear, you removed me from your life. I'm simply respecting your decision." She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. She didn't expect calm. She wanted a fight. Something to blame. Something to scream over. But all I gave her was silence and truth. "I didn't scream when you left me out of your family photos," I continued. "I didn't cause a scene when you said I didn't belong at your holiday table. I just listened. And adjusted." Her lips parted to say something, but she didn't have words ready. Because what do you say when the person you tried to make small turns out to be holding the floor you're standing on? "The payments are gone," she said, trying to sound firm, but her voice cracked. "We can't afford this house without those payments. We have kids. Do you want us to lose everything?" I tilted my head just a little. "You seem to be managing just fine without me last month," I said gently. "Decorating, hosting, laughing. You didn't need me then. I assume you'll figure it out now." The tension in the room could have sliced through steel. But I let it hang there. I let her feel the weight of her choices, the cold echo of exclusion. Then, as she turned toward the door, probably hoping for one last look of regret, one soft offer to fix things, I stood and walked her out. As she stepped onto the porch, I looked her in the eye and said, "Good luck with the next mortgage cycle, and the one after that." Then I closed the door. Quietly. Completely. And I returned to my tea. Still warm. Just the way I like it. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was standing outside of something I built. I wasn't chasing after invitations or hoping for scraps of affection dressed up as tradition. I was home, in my home. My little place isn't grand. 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and wallpaper that's seen more seasons than I can count. But it's mine. And more than that, it's peaceful. Outside the back window, my garden was sleeping under a soft blanket of winter frost. The rosebush I planted after my husband passed still stood tall near the fence. We called it Eleanor's Grace. She blooms red every spring, like she remembers why I named her after strength. I sat by the window and watched the birds pick at the seeds I'd left out on the feeder. Blue jays, cardinals, the occasional squirrel trying his luck. No noise, no cold smiles. No room full of people pretending I didn't matter. Just the rustle of wind, the creak of the heater, and the photo of my husband on the bookshelf, smiling like he knew I'd be just fine. His eyes always had a way of reminding me who I am. Not what they said I was. Not what they decided I no longer fit into. Who I am. There were no gifts under my tree that year. No grandbabies tugging at my sleeves. No second slice of pie served out of obligation. But there was peace, the kind of peace that comes after a storm you didn't cause but refused to drown in. I didn't need anyone to clap for me. I didn't need the world to know what I'd done. The only person I needed to prove anything to was already proud of me. I smiled at that thought. Let it settle deep. Because the truth is, they celebrated without me. But I survived without them. They celebrated without me, but I survived without them. Weeks passed. January melted into February. The frost began to loosen its grip on the soil outside, and the days stretched just a little longer. Life, as it does, moved forward. I went about my routine. Tea at sunrise, tending to my plants, even if the ground was still hard, a book or two by the window. I didn't speak about what happened. I didn't tell my friends or bring it up at church. Some things don't need to be gossiped about. Some things just settle in the quiet, where they belong. Then, one afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to dip behind the oak tree in my yard, there was a knock at my door. but not like Melissa's. This one was soft, hesitant. I opened it slowly and saw Daniel, standing there alone. No coat, no wife, no ego. Just a man who looked more like the boy I raised than the man I'd watched drift away. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me like he'd forgotten what home felt like. His eyes were red, tired. Then, finally, his voice cracked. "I didn't know," he said. "Mom, I didn't know you were paying for all of it. I didn't know she said those things about you." I didn't cry, not right away. I stepped aside and let him in. He sat on the edge of the couch like he didn't know if he deserved to be there. I made us some tea, out of habit, not sentiment, and sat across from him. No words filled the space, just 2 mugs steaming between us. Then I said calmly, "You didn't ask." He blinked. "What?" I repeated it, slower this time. "You didn't ask, Daniel. You never once asked how the bills got paid, or how your mother, the woman who worked double shifts to buy you school shoes, could suddenly afford to stay quiet for years." He looked down at his hands. "That," I continued, "was the betrayal. Not Melissa. Not Christmas. Not the party. It was that you never wondered if I was still standing behind you, holding everything up, and you never looked back to check." He tried to apologize. Said all the words he thought I needed to hear. Said he'd fix it. Said he'd talk to her. That he didn't mean to hurt me. That he thought I'd always be around. That I'd understand. I listened. But I didn't rush to forgive. Because sometimes forgiveness is a process, not a performance. Sometimes the door opens, but the healing stays behind it, taking its time. I told him I appreciated his honesty. I told him he could come by again, when he was ready to talk like a son. Not a man looking to patch a sinking ship. He asked if Melissa could come next time. I looked him in the eye and said, "Let's start with just you." He nodded, slowly, stood up, looked around the room like it felt smaller than he remembered. As he reached the door, he turned and said, "You were always the strongest one." I didn't answer. He already knew. And when the door closed behind him, I sat in that same chair staring out at the garden. Nothing was fixed, nothing was final. But something had shifted. Not in him, in me. You know, sometimes people assume that if you don't fight back loud enough, you must be fine with the way they treat you. That if you stay quiet, you must be weak. That if you don't cause a scene, then it didn't really hurt. But let me tell you something I've learned with time and tears. Sometimes, family forgets who bled for their comfort. They forget who stayed up all night when they were sick. Who worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Who gave up new shoes so they could go on a school field trip. They forget who paid the down payment when they didn't have a dollar to their name, and who kept paying the bills long after they stopped saying thank you. And when people forget, they start to rewrite the story without you in it. But I didn't tear down their house. I just stopped holding it up. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I just stopped helping where I wasn't seen. I didn't scream. I didn't post on Facebook. I didn't show up uninvited. I sat in my home with my name, my peace, and my memory. And I remembered that the only person who needed to value me was already in the mirror. So if they ever uninvite you, from their holidays, their celebrations, their lives, don't beg to return. Just remind them whose hands built the table they now feast at. And then, go make yourself a plate. One filled with peace, with truth, with quiet dignity, the kind that doesn't need applause to stand tall. To every person listening, thank you. Thank you for sitting with me, for hearing my truth, for carrying yours. This is Granny Truths, where silence is not weakness, it's justice. And if you've ever been cast aside, betrayed, or forgotten by the very people you gave everything to, I want you to know something. You're not alone here. Drop your story in the comments. Or send it to the email below if it's too personal for the world to read. Because your story matters. Your truth matters. And this space? It was built for you. So go on and subscribe. We've got more to say, and we're just getting started. Thank you for watching. Granny love you.